Hey guys, how's it going? So I figured it's been a little bit since I've uploaded, and given that we are a few days away from Donald Trump's inauguration into his second term, I figured we would take the time to consider the future. And I thought it would be a good idea to do a 2028 ranking of potential Democratic candidates. Now, this isn't all of them, right? And it's also not going to be well, I'm sure a lot of these guys won't even consider running. I already see a couple. I already see a couple that are definitely going to be going in F tier. I see a couple that I have no clue who they are. Also, keep in mind I'm going to be coming at this from a Democratic progressive bias, at least compared to a Republican view. So obviously, I'm not going to be. There's not going to be too much criticizing, but still, there are some candidates that I would much rather prefer than others. Also, the way I'll be ranking this is based on how likely I think this candidate is to win a primary, right? So their ability to secure the nomination for the Democratic Party, and then also their ability to win a general election. If I think they could do well in both, they're going to be higher up on the tier list, which I've organized from, or it's already been organized from S to no idea here. Those are the basic rules that I've set here. So let's get started. First up is AOC. AOC tends to be a lot more progressive than a typical Democrat, which is something that I do find appealing. Um, I obviously am very much a big fan. I think she's a lot like Bernie in some cases, like Bernie Sanders. Um, as much as I would like a person like AOC to be president, I don't really see a future sometime in the near future of her winning a general election, much less a general election than a primary. I'm sure she could do pretty well in a primary, but I don't see her doing pretty well in a general election. I think she would possibly alienate a lot of the voters. But again, says nothing about my personal opinion about AOC. I think she would be a good president. Um, I agree with a lot of her political views. I just don't see her doing too well in a primary or general sometime soon. I think she definitely needs more political experience. She only took office in 2018, and she's only a representative. So there is that. But I don't think she's the worst. She's by no means the worst candidate the Democrats could throw. I'm going to put AOC in the C tier. Then we have Amy Klobuchar, who is another person who's ran for president before. I believe she's from Minnesota. So, not exactly a state that's all too competitive, but she's still in the Rust Belt region, which is a region that Democrats absolutely need to win. Um, I think I'd be a lot more comfortable in a general election voting for someone like Amy Klobuchar. Well, I wouldn't have a problem voting for AOC. I just mean, I think Amy Klobuchar's chances of winning a general election are much higher. Can't really think of too many cons for her. She's an overall good candidate. She's not the best, but I think a solid B tier is good for Amy Klobuchar. Andy Bashir is gaining a lot of popularity. I know that there are definitely a few people who are wanting Andy Bashir to run for president in 2028. Governor of Kentucky, which is an interesting position. Um, Obviously, Kentucky's a very red Republican state. The fact that he's managed to win the governor's race in Kentucky, he's the governor, a Democratic governor, should say something about him. I think his chances of winning a primary are solid. I think he would definitely garner a lot of support in the South, which would be a pretty nice region for Democrats to win more. I think his chances of securing a swing state like Georgia are pretty high. North Carolina, potentially. I'm not sure how he would do in the Sunbelt region of Arizona and Nevada. And he might have some trouble in the Rust Belt, but I don't really see him as an overall bad um, candidate to run. I think he still needs some time to get some fame, some recognition. I think he needs to get out more, but I overall think he'd be another pretty solid candidate. I'm going to put Andy Bashir probably at the top of B tier for now. Next, we have Chris Murphy, who is he's a senator, I believe, of Connecticut. Chris Murphy's kind of a standard, at least in my opinion, kind of a standard Democrat, which I want to say we had with Kamala Harris, who we will eventually get to, hopefully. Um, Not a lot to say about Chris Murphy. Again, senator of Connecticut, which isn't really a state that's too difficult for Democrats to win. If the Democrats were failing to win Connecticut, I'd be extremely concerned. Um, I don't know too much about him, but to me, at least he seems like a pretty standard Democrat. I would probably put him on par with someone like Kamala Harris. I'm going to stick him in C tier for now. I'm not sure if he'd be better than AOC, but I'm just going to stick him in C tier. Next, we have Cory Booker, who is a senator, I believe, of New Jersey. Which, if you asked me a couple years ago if he'd be a good pick, I would have said no. But considering the rightward trend that the country has faced, it's possible that New Jersey becomes a swing state. And in that case, I think Cory Booker would be an okay pick. Obviously, as a senator from New Jersey, he could help to boost Democratic support in the state. He comes obviously from the New England region. That could possibly help in the Rust Belt, especially in an important state like Pennsylvania. Not too much exactly to say about Cory Booker. Again, it all largely depends on what the future of a state like New Jersey looks like. He's not necessarily a bad candidate, but I think someone like Andy Bashir, Amy Klobuchar might be better. I'm going to put him at the top of C tier for now. Then we have Elizabeth Warren, who is another senator. This time, I believe she's a senator of Massachusetts, if I'm not wrong. I get her confused with the senator of Wisconsin. Again, kind of, she tends, from what I know of Elizabeth Warren, from what I remember, she tends to be a tad bit more progressive than some of these candidates like Chris Murphy and Cory Booker. But she doesn't really have too much recognition, mainly because she's lost primaries. And there's not too much to go off from there. Senator from Massachusetts, again, not really a state that Democrats would need to worry about in the future, hopefully. I mean, again, she wouldn't be the worst pick, but I get the sense that a lot of people aren't exactly ecstatic to vote for someone like Elizabeth Warren. She's also getting older. I believe she's 75 now. I'm probably going to put her bottom of C tier. Gavin Newsom, the current governor of California. Gavin Newsom is seeming to be the front runner for the 2028 Democratic nomination. He seems to be the most popular potential candidate. I've always kind of called Newsom the Democratic Trump, at least in the sense that he knows how to debate well. He knows how to bully. There's nothing. The problem is Newsom is extremely wealthy, which obviously on its own isn't necessarily a problem. But if you're running for the Democratic Party, which claims to be the party of the working class, obviously it's going to seem a little bit hypocritical if you're running a millionaire, billionaire, whatever. A lot of people have complained that he kind of comes off as elitist, which I do kind of agree with. He does seem to be kind of a uppity kind of guy. But he does do, things like debates, speeches fairly well. He had a bit of a interesting debate with Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. Used to be the governor of Florida now, at least. Which I don't know how I feel about that, but I don't. So I should specify this all depends on how Trump's second term goes. If Trump's second term goes well and they run Gavin Newsom, I would probably still vote for him, but I wouldn't have a lot of confidence in him winning. Again, it's all dependent on how Trump's second term goes. I'm probably gonna put Newsom at the. Hmm, I'm gonna. I might change this just given other potential candidates, but I'm gonna put him at the top of C tier. The problem is Gavin Newsom is from California. He's a California liberal, which isn't going to appeal to a lot of the voters that Democrats need to win over, like places in the Rust Belt, places in the South, like Georgia, North Carolina. He needs to be able to appeal to these people, and he's a California liberal. On the other hand, Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan and also a frontrunner for the potential nomination. I'll just say it. I think Whitmer's probably an A tier. I think she would have definitely been a much better pick if somehow that would have been possible instead of Kamala Harris. She's fairly popular in her home state of Michigan. I don't know if it's where she was born, but that's where she's governing. Fairly popular in Michigan. Michigan's obviously a swing state, a state that Democrats pretty much need to win if they want to win an election. Um, and again, winning a state like Michigan could help boost your popularity, boost your support in the Rust Belt, which, as I've said before, the Rust Belt is a necessary region to win. And besides that, I like Gretchen Whitmer. There are some things that I think she could do better, but I don't have really any problems with Gretchen Whitmer. I'd probably, out of all these guys, obviously she'd be the first one I'd rather want to be nominated. I think I'm going to put Gretchen Whitmer at the top of A tier for now. Jared Polis, I believe, is the governor of Colorado. Um, I think I don't. I mean, I don't know a lot about Jared Polis. I don't think a lot of people know a lot about Jared Polis. I know that he sent like a pretty interesting tweet out about RFK Jr. He kind of comes off as more libertarian from what I've gathered, and um, I think at least I think that was Jared Polis. Trying to walk that middle ground doesn't seem to be working for a lot of Democrats anymore. And I just don't think Jared Polis would do well in a primary, much less a general election. I think do much better just to stay in Colorado. I think Jared Polis is probably going to be the first D tier. J.B. Pritzker, governor of Illinois. Pritzker is another interesting one. Like Newsom, he's extremely wealthy. So at the very least, he would be able to run a solid enough campaign. Again, the problem that I'm sure he would face is that he is wealthy, extremely wealthy. Running for the quote party of the working class, it might come off as a little hypocritical um, to run him as your nominee. He's passed some fairly decent legislation in his state of Illinois. Um, I mean, I don't really have too many issues with him. I honestly, I'd probably put him at the top of C tier. I think him and Newsom kind of deserve to be together a little bit. I'd probably prefer Pritzker over Newsom, but yeah, I'm not too sure. I'm not too sure how the Democrats would do sending out a millionaire, billionaire, whatever, as their nominee. John Fetterman is an interesting one. Another Democrat that seems to walk the middle ground. He recently got complimented by Donald Trump for I can't quite remember what it was, but he seems to be a middleman. I know at first he kind of advertised himself as this progressive, and now he's kind of a moderate. I'm not sure how he would fare in a general election. He might do okay in a primary. I don't think he's an extremely presidential person. Just his general demeanor, his attitude. Also, some of his stances, I think, kind of similar to Jared Polis, are too. I don't want to say far right, but some of his stances on things like the Israeli Palestinian conflict, stuff like that, does not bode well for the current Democratic Party. I'm probably going to put John Fetterman, probably going to keep him at the bottom of C tier. C tier's filling up pretty quickly. Then we have John Ossoff. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Senator from Georgia. I believe Georgia's probably the safest bet for Democrats in terms of that being a swing state they can win. I think it's one of the only states that saw some shifts to the left. Not necessarily a bad pick. I think he needs a little more time in the spotlight. I don't think a lot of people know about him, but just given that he's from Georgia, he's a fairly decent Democrat. I mean, I think. Do I put him in the bottom of B tier, top of C tier? I think I'm going to put him at the top of C tier. I'm sure that there's probably some other Democrats that could fill B tier here. Oh, Jon Stewart. Okay. So Jon Stewart is a host of a late night show. I like Jon Stewart. Um, I'm not sure how a celebrity would do in an election, but hey, we've seen celebrities bode well in presidential elections. Just look at Donald Trump. I think Jon Stewart is kind of in a similar position to AOC. He holds very quote unquote controversial opinions that I think might isolate a lot of the people he needs to win over. And to me, Jon Stewart doesn't really seem like the kind of guy to walk the middle ground, from what I've seen of him. He's a funny guy. I like a lot of his stuff. I don't see him doing too well in a primary and or a general election. Um, I think I'm gonna have to keep him here in D tier. Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro is, I think, one of the more likely nominees. Governor of Pennsylvania, which is a state that needs to be won by Democrats. So obviously, be a pretty decent pick there. He's a fairly moderate Democrat, but it doesn't bode too much against him. He's associated himself with Kamala Harris quite a bit. Um, he's a fairly popular guy in Pennsylvania. Um, some of his stances, as a moderate, are obviously, I'm not going to agree with a lot of them. Again, some of his takes on, I believe, the conflict in Israel um, are not aligning with the current Democratic Party, but still, he's maintaining his position as a moderate. I think he's probably an A tier, honestly. Um, Here with Gretchen Whitmer, I think Gretchen Whitmer and Josh Shapiro are kind of in the same boat. They hold a very similar base. I honestly think these two would be a good president and vice president duo, whoever fills what role, whatever. I think these two would be a pretty solid duo, especially since Gretchen Whitmer comes from Michigan, Josh Shapiro comes from Pennsylvania. So, pretty useful there. Kamala Harris. There's actually a pretty good chance that she runs again in 2028, tries to get nominated. I think she'd probably have a better chance if she went through the actual democratic process of going through a primary, um, securing a nomination. I think the problem is, well, again, I supported Kamala Harris, right? Again, but she extremely struggled with this middle ground take that a lot of Democrats are doing, trying to appeal to too many sides at once. Um, Also, unfortunately, I think she is too closely associated with the Biden administration, despite the fact that the Biden administration has done more good than it has done harm. People aren't willing to look into that. And so I think a lot of people are going to keep associating her with the failures and quote unquote failures of the Biden administration. She's not the worst pick, obviously. Comes from California, which again, I don't know if a California liberal is based in California, which I don't know if a California liberal is something we need to be running. But she's definitely better than a lot of these C tier picks. Oh, in terms of her chances of winning a primary, I think her chances of winning a primary are fairly high. I'm gonna put Kamala. I'm gonna probably put her at. Oh man, I'm gonna put her at the top of C tier. I don't want her to be the nominee, but I think she has a pretty solid chance of winning the nomination. Um, Not as much as these guys. I would. Well, Amy Klobuchar, I think, could be moved. I might move her, but Kamala Harris is by no means the worst. I just don't want her to be the nominee, but that's one thing. Kathy Hochul is one that I have no idea. I'd have to do more research on her. LeBron James. Um, I mean, really, seriously, LeBron James. I mean, he's a great guy. I think he's cool, but come on, seriously, this is got to be a joke. Mark Kelly from my home state of Arizona. Um, he's Mark Kelly's okay. Um, he's another one of those politicians that I think would do much better if he stayed on the local kind of statewide level here in Arizona. That said, I mean, he's not necessarily a terrible candidate to run. I'd probably put him somewhere. Yeah, probably above Cory Booker, but he'd probably not do as good as someone like Newsom, Pritzker, Ossoff, Harris. I think Kelly would need to gain more recognition nationwide, and I think he'd do much better staying in Arizona for now. Pete, I always fail to pronounce his last name. Pete Buttigieg, I believe. Um, I think he's done a very good job as a spokesperson for the Democratic Party. Pete's a very good debater. He goes on Fox News a lot and argues with a lot of them. He does a very good job. I think he'd be extremely charismatic. Currently, the Secretary of Transportation. Um, so, you know, it would be an interesting jump to go from that to president. Um, I mean, he's not the worst pick. Obviously, this isn't a problem for me, but I think the fact that he's gay might prove to be a bit of an unfortunate issue for um, minorities in states like Michigan, especially the large Muslim population there. Um, a lot of conservatives, a lot of maybe even some independents might have a problem with him being gay. Again, not necessarily the worst pick. I mean, I think I'd put him probably below Andy Bashir, but above Klobuchar. I just think that he might, unfortunately, isolate some of the supporters who might simply not vote for him simply for the fact that he's gay, which is unfortunate. But it's the truth of this country so far. We haven't elected a woman president. I don't think the country would be ready to elect a gay president, unfortunately. Phil Murphy again. I need to do more research on this guy. Raphael Warnock. I'm actually a big fan of this guy. Senator from Georgia, and I believe he's also a pastor at MLK's church. Extremely charismatic guy. Very great public speaker. I believe he would do a very good job at garnering support in the Black community, which is a community that Democrats need to win. Do well in the South. Obviously, I think he would lock down Georgia. Might loosen up North Carolina a little bit more. He might do okay in states like Arizona and Nevada. I think he can definitely appeal to the working class base, which I think the um, Democrats obviously need to do. I think Raphael Warnock would be an overall solid pick. I think he'd need to, again, garner a little bit more national attention, but I think Raphael Warnock is up here with Gretchen Whitmer and Josh Shapiro. I think I would prefer him over Josh Shapiro, maybe over Whitmer. Warnock might be my pick, but we'll see. Ro Khanna, need to do more research. Roy Cooper, former governor of North Carolina. He left his office pretty recently, I believe. I know he has had some presidential ambitions, kind of in a similar situation to Warnock, where he might be able to lock down his state of North Carolina, potentially Georgia, which are states that would definitely help the Democratic Party. Um, Again, I feel like he's kind of been relegated to a North Carolina guy. So if he garnered more national attention, I think he'd be a pretty solid pick. I'm going to keep him um, in B tier. I'm going to put him above Klobuchar and yeah, I'll put him above Buttigieg. Ruben Gallego, the senator-elect for Arizona. Um, Again, a pretty decent pick. Again, I think Gallego. I personally don't know too much about him. Obviously, I voted for him, but I don't know too much about him personally. I think a lot of people voted for Gallego simply out of the fact that it was either him or Kari Lake. A lot of Arizonans do not like Kari Lake. I think Ruben Gallego definitely needs to garner a lot more attention. Right now, he seems like he'd be more of just an Arizona guy, but if he did do well in a primary, I think he could definitely help to garner the support of the Latino community, which is a community that is drastically turning away from the Democratic Party. Um, I think he would definitely. It might be more difficult just given that Arizona is trending more Republican. I think he might be able to pull off a Democratic victory in Arizona if he ran in a general, maybe even in Nevada. I'm not sure how he would do in the Deep South, and his position in the Rust Belt is also questionable. Um, that having said that, probably C tier. I mean, he's not a bad pick. Could be worse. I think I'd probably put him. I'll put him next to Mark Kelly. We have the two Arizona guys here. Probably a little bit better than Mark Kelly. Taylor Swift. Gonna be an F tier for me. Tim Walz. I hope I don't run out of time here. I do have a little bit of a limit. Tim Walz, current governor of Minnesota, fairly popular guy in Minnesota. He kind of strikes me as someone who wouldn't run for president. I think he is definitely a much more of a vice presidential figure. Um, you know, he's fine. I think he would have been a much better pick than Kamala Harris. I think I'll probably put him at the top of C tier. Um, Funny, Amy Klobuchar, Tim Walz. Yeah, I think top of C tier, and then Wes Moore. I've heard Wes Moore being described as a second Obama, which I kind of agree with. Um, he's very charismatic, a great speaker. Senator or governor of Maryland, I can't remember which is not a state the Democrats are really worried about. I also don't really see him as very presidential. Um, but I mean, again, not necessarily a terrible pick. He could obviously garner support from the black community. I'm gonna put him probably next to Cory Booker. And then if I had to pick one for the S tier of who I would probably most want, I think it would have to be between. Oh man, in terms of how I think they do, I think personally I would like Raphael Warnock, but I think Josh Shapiro probably has a better chance at winning an election. Um, yeah, I think that's probably better. Personally, I would prefer Warnock. I think Shapiro probably has the best chances out of most of these guys to win the 2028 election. So there you have it. yeah, I guess we'll see what happens within the next few years. Again, this all depends on how Trump's